Today on GameWorx we discuss Spec Ops: The Line and what it means to kill people in video games. Do you like being sad? I like being sad. Spec Ops: The Line! Okay, so before we get into this, I just have to warn everybody watching that this game is really dark. And by extension, this episode is probably going to be much darker than general as well. This game deals with themes of death, insanity, torture, PTSD. If you don't like or can't handle things like that, and I'm being totally serious here, go watch something else. Maybe one of our other episodes if you want, but seriously, this shit can get real fucked up real fast. Okay, anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's jump into today's topic. Violence and killing in video games has long been a very contentious subject in our society. Games, and really media in general, are often used as scapegoats for terrible things that happen in our everyday lives that seem too terrible to explain. It's very hard to take a deep look at our society and consider the often myriad of complex pressures that can cause terrible and violent things to happen, and it can be kind of a scary thing to do as well. Looking into the darker parts of our society is basically looking into the darker parts of ourselves, and most people just don't want to do that. And can you blame them? So we get knee-jerk reactions against easy targets like video games, which we usually just dismiss as reactionary, alarmist speculation. But the claim that violence in media affects nothing is also clearly ridiculous, as the media you consume clearly has an effect on your outlook of the world around you. Hey, I see you there writing that angry comment. Just hold on, unclick the dislike button, just hold on a second. Let's delve into this issue using a game that perfectly represents the myriad of complex gray areas within this topic, Spec Ops: The Line. Spec Ops: The Line began development in 2007 when the publisher, 2K, gave the project to Jaeger Games as a reboot of the Spec Ops franchise. The previous games in this series had sold poorly, and an earlier attempt by Rockstar to reboot the game had utterly failed. The game was finally released in 2012, to mixed critical acclaim for the single-player elements and a general meh about the multiplayer. This is fitting, as for me, the single player is what really shines in this game, and it's what we're going to focus on in this episode. There are major spoilers after this part, so if you want to skip directly to me talking about violence and killing in games, click the face of everybody's favorite non-violent practitioner of civil disobedience. As I've seen becoming sort of a theme with really great games, you can tell a lot about it by its opening start screen. For example, in this game we can see a tattered American flag in front of a destroyed-looking city, which gives us some limited context of what this game is going to be about. But this start screen especially shines in its choice of music. Here, take a listen. For those of you not familiar with this specific version of the Star-Spangled Banner, this is the version by Jimi Hendrix, made famous as his opening song at Woodstock. This strange, twisted version of the song, in its original context, became something of a theme song for the counterculture, anti-war movement of the late 60s. It was seen as implying something strange and imperfect, encroaching on the American ideal, and basically a middle finger to the traditionalist establishment that saw American songs as unchangeable anthems that demanded respect. Using this song as the opening was a masterstroke on the part of Jaeger, as it implied the shadowy morality and challenging of common Western ideas about war and heroism that awaited the player inside of the game. Opening up the game, we see a scene of 3 special operatives sent into a destroyed Dubai, coming in on a reconnaissance mission after a previous American squad sent in to help, the 33rd, was trapped inside by a storm wall, blocking all radio signals. The beginning of the game is essentially Walker, the captain of the Spec Ops team, going against his orders to do strictly reconnaissance and trying to figure out what has happened in the city since the storm wall went up and their radios went down. The team's lack of understanding and continuing insistence on pushing forward continually places them on the side of different factions, sometimes on the side of the 33rd, sometimes on the side of the rogue soldiers, and sometimes on the side of the CIA agents who have also infiltrated the city. They basically continue bumbling forward until Walker makes a huge mistake. He finds a camp of hundreds of soldiers and several tanks, far more firepower than his team can handle, and chooses to use some spare white phosphorus near their hiding place to clear them all out. After doing this, Walker and his team walk through the devastation they've created, trying to shy away from the tortured screams of the soldiers. When they reach the end of the camp, however, they discovered their mistake. The soldiers were escorting a large group of civilians into the safety of their main camp, and they were caught in the crossfire, slowly burnt alive and killed by the white phosphorus barrage. Walker, unable to accept what they did, vows to find the leader of the 33rd, Conrad, and take revenge for what he sees as forcing his hand into killing the civilians he was trying to save. The rest of the game is a continuation of Walker's now relentless drive forward towards Conrad, during which he accidentally destroys the remaining water supply for all of Dubai. Walker also picks up a radio and talks to Conrad over it, being heckled and threatened by him the entire game. As Walker zeroes in on Conrad at the end, by which time both his other team members have already died, he finds the dead body of Conrad, who committed suicide long before Walker even entered the city. Walker then realizes that many of the things he's been through since the white phosphorus incident, including hearing Conrad's voice over the radio, have been in his head. Okay, so let's take a moment to deconstruct all this for a moment. Let's begin with Walker's insistence on moving forward and constant switching of sides. This point, to me, is one of the largest and most subtle, if only because it spans near the entire game. Walker's insistence on continuing forward, despite all evidence that every ill-fated and misinformed move that he and his team makes just fucks the situation harder and harder, rings loudly of a hero complex, or a misinformed belief that he can somehow fix the situation. Now you might think, and I did at first, that this is just holding up a mirror to the American tendency towards hero complexes, and our belief that any action that we take has a moral absolute towards goodness, and on some level, this definitely is. But on a closer inspection, it even more closely puts a mirror up to us, the person playing the game. I mean, Yager's not dumb. They knew that anybody playing Spec Ops: The Line after nearly 10 years of inactivity from the franchise was bound to be a lover of the shooter genre. So with that knowledge, they posed this question to those players. Why do you have a hero complex? What is it that appeals to you about playing games that make you the invincible, morally superior hero that many modern shooters make you? That is heavy stuff. Let's move on to the real turning point of the story, the white phosphorus scene. To get into the real meat of this, we have to split it into its parts, so let's first look at the beginning of the scene. As Walker mans the computer targeting system for the white phosphorus, you can see the slight reflection of his face on the screen. When you're playing this game, especially on a computer like I did, this makes it look like the face you're seeing is your face. This seems like a small thing, but it's huge. It's not some character that you're separate from doing these terrible actions, you're seeing your reflection as you shoot the white phosphorus at these soldiers. But that in itself doesn't gain weight until the middle section of walking through the soldiers. I mean, plenty of shooters have you doing huge, terrible things, often through a computer targeting screen, just like this scene. But rarely do they then force the consequences of these things into your face in quite a spectacular way as Spec Ops: The Line does. Even before you find the innocent civilians at the end, you are forced through a burning hell of what you just caused. You viewed this originally through a screen that separated you from your actions, but now you're forced to confront and literally walk through it. Not even to mention the shot at the end of the civilian mother holding her child. I'm pretty sure this image is permanently seared into my brain. All of these things are antithetical to each other. What you did so easily through a computer screen is contrasted with the horrible realities of what it caused. This forces you as a player to really confront the actions that you took in this game and what exactly they mean for you as a human being controlling a video game. So as I said earlier, this scene is really the crux of the game that you can split it in half around. The differences in the game between before and after this scene are striking, and intentionally so. The character design of Walker changes from cool, orderly, and officerial into wild, feral, and unkempt, a visual indication of his descent into becoming just a psycho killer. Voice acting also changes drastically, and big props to Nolan North for this part. Similar to the character design, Walker's voice commands to his team, kill confirmations, and execution moves change drastically from the beginning to the end. Here, just look at them at the beginning.
Focus your fire! Target dead!
And now look at them nearing the end of the game.
I need him dead! Got the son of a bitch!
It's a pretty chilling transformation when you put them side by side like that. Along with these things, they changed some things that I never even considered as a medium for emotional impact, the loading screens. At the beginning, the loading times are pretty normal shooter fare, giving tips on how to use guns, some basic strategies, and depicting normal scenes of Walker and his team taking out their enemies. But as you progress, the screen starts getting more and more gruesome and grotesque, and the text on the bottom of the screen begins to gradually and subtly become darker. The game slowly starts sprinkling them in, and by the time you reach the end of the game, the loading screens only say things like, "There is no difference between what is right and what is necessary. To kill for yourself is murder, to kill for your country is heroic, and to kill for entertainment is harmless." And the one that made me, I will admit, shed a single manly tear, "You are still a good person." The beautiful thing about these screens is they are blatantly talking to you, the player, and not a character in-game breaking the fourth wall. So even if you're playing through all of this, and the philosophical ramifications of what's happening have gone completely over your head, and you're still in the mindset of, well, my character's doing all this stuff, not me, so I don't need to care, these loading screens violently rip you out of it by speaking to and directly questioning you. Of course I'm still a good person, game. Why would you even ask that, game? Don't be so rude, game. Why, yes, I do happen to be sweating out of my eyes today, game. I'm cutting onions while playing my shooters. Everybody does it, game. So, okay, I'm not trying to say that killing people in games is necessarily a terrible thing, and I don't think Jaeger Games was trying to say that either. If we're being honest, it can be fun. It's fun to overcome obstacles placed in front of us, and the most innate, natural obstacles in our minds are other people. And no, I don't think that doing these things makes you a psycho killer or that it teaches people that killing is okay. I mean, it's not like we're Fox News or anything. Whoa, political joke! But I think it's a bad thing when we do these things without thinking or examining what we're doing, which unfortunately is exactly what many shooters are just asking us to do. They ask us to just engage in a mindless power fantasy with no thought. We have to think about why we have this love of power fantasy that most games give us. What inner need drives us to pretend to be a hero when, in reality, if our character went through the things that we often play through, they'd be left broken, like Walker is. We have to consider the real implication of what it means for real people to shoot other real people in the real world, which is basically what we're simulating in these games. You could argue that they're pixels and not people, but they represent people, to us internally. If these computer-generated images didn't represent people to us on some level, would scenes like we see in Spec Ops disturb us or make us question what we're doing? I don't think they would. See you guys next episode. Like if you like to like things, comment if you commonly comment on things, subscribe, and if you really want to help us out, share the video on the social medias if you liked it. I promise, the next episode is not going to be this depressing. Hopefully.